Pioneer, what a format. If you like putting +1/+1 counters on your creatures, turning them sideways and swinging at your opponent, well, I've got the deck for you. Let's go. Hello, my name is Christian from Chad Magic. Today I'm going to be taking you through my Tier 1 Mono White Humans. Now this came first place at the Legacy Regional Qualifier event in Liverpool at Just Play Games. Go check out Just Play. I wanted to share this Pioneer deck list with you, basically showcasing what I think is the Tier 1 Mono White Humans list. I'm going to be going through what came first on the day, and then I'm going to go through what changes I'm going to be making for the Brothers' War. Let's get into it. So we'll start off in the order that Moxfield has presented it in. And the first creature we have here is we have a 1 of Abzan Falconer. Now, Abzan Falconer is not necessarily the best card you've ever seen, but it's a great finisher in this deck because we create lots of +1/+1 counters on our creatures, and in itself, it is a human. And this can give all of those flying to devastate your opponent. So we're running this as a one-off in the competition. We have 3 Adeline Resplendent Cathar. So Adeline is an absolutely busted card. This is so good. It comes down, it's 3 mana. Whenever you attack, doesn't have to attack itself. For each opponent, you create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking. So the turn this comes in, it puts 2 humans on the board, which is relevant for some of the other creatures. And I run this as a 3 of. Now, many deck lists have this as a 4 of, but I've chosen to go for a 3 of here because of the legendary rule. I think that the 4th copy instead, I'm running the Abzan Falconer just to give an additional way to win the game. One of our best cards in the deck is the Brutal Cathar. If you've played, any arena with this card or in paper, this is absolutely devastating. It comes down, exiles one of your creatures. It has another side to it, which is the Moonrage Brute. And then when it flips again back into Brutal Cathar, you can exile another creature. So this is actually really devastating for the opponent, and it's a fantastic way to curve out at 3 mana. So if we've got like a 1-drop, 2-drop, and then a Brutal Cathar, quite often it can already be over for the opponent. Going into some of the other creatures now, we have 4 of Dauntless Bodyguard here. So Dauntless Bodyguard's got the stats of a Savannah Lions. It's a 2/1 for 1. When it comes in, you can choose another creature and then sacrifice Dauntless Bodyguard to give that indestructible. This is really good for protecting some of our bigger creatures, but also is a reasonably statted 2/1 for 1 as well. And obviously it's a human, so it has a relevant creature type for us. This quite often is important because it will stop that removal from the opponent. You can basically give something indestructible. I'm running a 2 of Extraction Specialist. Now, Extraction Specialist is a 3/2 for 2 and a white with lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, you return target card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now, although that creature, when it comes in, can't attack or block, still think that Extraction Specialist is really good for bringing back our Thalia's Lieutenant, especially. I'll come to Thalia's Lieutenant in a minute. But Extraction Specialist is a 2 of, good to get stuff back onto the board. We can get 2 humans onto the battlefield in one go. And it also has that lifelink as well, which can be necessary in some of the matches. Quite often, Extraction Specialist is one of the cards that we will sideboard out against certain matchups. But I run it as a 2 of in this deck. Hopeful Initiate, we're running 4 of. So this is an absolute star 1-drop. This is the one that you want in your hand when you start the game. Hopeful Initiate is a 1/2 for 1 with training. So whenever it attacks with another creature of greater power, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then you can remove 2 +1/+1 counters and pay 2 and a white to basically destroy target artifact or enchantment. Now, one of the things here to notice is it's remove 2 +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control. So we can use this card basically to get rid of some of those, frustrating artifacts, frustrating enchantments that are running some of the decks across the format. We run a 1 of Kythian Hero of Akros, a 2/1 against Savannah Lion stats. The end of combat, if it attacked with at least 2 other creatures, you can exile it and return Kythian, and you basically get a Planeswalker. You get Gideon Battleforged, which is, absolutely fantastic to have. Essentially you can have this, turn 3. And then you'll basically be able to untap a creature, give it indestructible to use as a blocker, and then you can swing in with Gideon as a 4/4 creature yourself. So really, really useful there. The Luminarch Aspirant, fantastic card. This did a big number when it was in standard. Essentially, for 2 mana, you're getting a 1/1, but at the beginning of combat on your turn, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This stacks up really quickly. And if you were saying, putting down a 1-drop like, as kind of like a Kythian, a Hopeful Initiate, or a Dauntless Bodyguard, something like that, and then you go into the Luminarch Aspirant, pretty soon you'll be out of control. So your opponent won't want to see this come down, because for stalemates, this eventually will take over the game. Right, running 3 Soldier of the Pantheon. This is a 1-drop, again, Savannah Line stats with a 2/1, and it has protection from multicolored, and whenever opponent casts a multicolored spell, you gain 1 life. Now, this is one of the cards that I'm swapping out now that the Brothers Wars happened. I'll come to those cards I'm going to swap out later. I feel like this is good against half the decks in the Pioneer format. So multicolored decks, you've got Rakdos, and then you've got like, is it Phoenix and stuff like that. But some of the decks are, there's the mono white mirror match, and then there's also mono green devotion. So I don't think Soldier of the Pantheon always has a great matchup, and therefore this is one of the ones which I've had my eye on to kind of like say, okay, this could be changed. But I did run 3 of these in the qualifier tournament. This is one of our best cards in the deck, Thalia's Lieutenant. It's a human soldier for 1 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control. So just absolutely, for 2 mana, you potentially adding like 5-6 power to the board straight away. And itself, it gets bigger when more humans enter the battlefield. So really, really great card. One of the things is when a Thalia's Lieutenant comes in and it stacks on top of each other, the Thalia's Lieutenant in play will get 2 +1/+1 counters. So really quickly can get out of control. They were running a Thalia Guardian of Thraben. If you know what this card is, if you played against this card, if you're running sort of like an instant sorceries kind of deck or something like that, this is one of those cards that your opponent really doesn't want to see. They hate it. And obviously it's a 2/1 with first strike, so once you get the +1/+1 counters on it, it's going to do really, really well for you. But this really slows your opponent down. And if let's say you've got down a creature on turn 1, you bring out Thalia turn 2, quite often your opponent is way off curve, and it's really difficult for them to catch up at this point. They're the creatures. Going into the instance, there's only 4 in the deck, and we're running Brave the Elements. So Brave the Elements essentially is a finisher for us. It also grants protection in some circumstances. The main reason you want this card is to get in for your final bits of damage, because you could essentially, for 1 mana, you choose a color, and white creatures, which is everything in your deck basically, gains protection from that color. So let's say you're against like a mono green devotion, they're obviously going to win the game if it goes on too long, but you can swing in turn 4 or 5 or something with this, and you get a free swing at the opponent, and that's usually enough. It's also really good as a protection spell. So if there's something that your opponent's going to get rid of some of your creatures, you want to keep the pressure on, you can use Brave the Elements, of course, to protect the creature from those spells. Then going into the lands, we've got 2 Castle Ardenvale. This is essentially to help us create human tokens, get more humans on the board. You can tap it for a white, or 2 and 2 white, and tap it to create a 1/1 white human creature token. Can be relevant. Usually we will want to create those humans to trigger a Thalia's Lieutenant, get some more +1/+1 counters, or to make Adeline bigger, because Adeline's power is equal to the number of creatures you control. We're running 2 of Iganjo, Seat of the Empire. This is a really, really useful spell here to get rid of some of your opponent's creatures. We don't have a lot of removal in the main deck. Well, we've got Dauntless Bodyguard. Sorry, not Dauntless Bodyguard. We've got Brutal Cathar. But Iganjo will help us there to essentially get rid of something for 3 mana. And it might be less as well if we've got things like the Thalia in play without actually using a non-creature spell. So you don't pay the tax and it'll be cheap. Mutavault. So Mutavault is really important in the deck. It's a colorless land, and you can pay 1 to have it become a 2/2 creature with all creature types until end of turn, but it's still a land. Really useful because you can basically activate this, play your Thalia's Lieutenant. You will put a +1/+1 counter on the Mutavault, and then it will become a bigger creature. It's also really good as well if you're playing in any opponent that is running creatures that have protection from white in them. So if you're running like, if you're playing against the Gruul deck, for example, and they put in the creature that has protection from white, I forget the name off the top of my head, you can activate this to block with it and potentially trade or defend yourself. Running 12 planes. This is one of the things that I maybe will go down to 21 lands in the future. Maybe had a bad experience in one of my games getting particularly flooded. I think the deck can run on 21 perhaps, because that would give an average of 2.45 lands in my opening hand. But we'll see. I'm going to test that on our Thursday Night Pioneer and let you know how that goes. 2 Sheffet Dunes. So Sheffet Dunes is... You can add a colorless or pay 1 life and add a white to your mana, or pay 2 and 2 white and tap it and sacrifice a desert, which will likely be itself, to give creatures you control +1/+1 until end of turn. Now, I've seen some people running 4 copies of this. That's absolutely fine, and in some cases it would be better. There are some other decks that maybe run you close with the life, or maybe you don't want to pay the 1 life, but I think in most cases you could probably run 4 of these, and that is the main deck. So some of the things that you may think differently about, you may not want the Abzan Falconer in there. I think 4 finishers by themselves maybe isn't enough, and having that extra 1 in there is good. I'm actually going to put in a second one. I'll come to that in a second. You may want to run 4 Adelines. It's just such a good card. And then it may be that you want to run maybe a different 1-drop instead of like a Soldier of the Pantheon. I certainly do, and I'll come into what I'm swapping that out for in a second. Before we go into that, though, I'll talk about my sideboard. So first off, we have 2 Damping Spheres. This is really good against Mono Green Devotion, but also good against Is It Phoenix as well. This kind of like really stopped them from playing properly. They don't want to see it come down. They've got to get rid of it. And yeah, especially Nykthos Devotion. It's a real problem for them. So running 2 of them in the sideboard. Got 3 Declaration in Stone. So that allows you to exile a target creature and all of the creature its controller controls with the same name as that creature. They do get some clue tokens, but by the time they're cracking clues, it's probably too late for them. This is really if you need hard removal against something, or you want something to, you know, not go to the graveyard. Essentially, if you're sideboarding in some removal, this is good. By the same kind of thing, we've got a Portable Hole as well. That's really good at getting rid of a couple of things for mana value 2 or less. It's good against when you're on the draw against like the likes of like Mono Green, because you can get rid of the mana dorks really easily. But it's also good as well if you're playing against things like a Croxer in a Rakdos deck, because you can just get rid of that that important piece for them, which would otherwise be a difficult creature for you to deal with. We're running 2 Rest in Peace as well. We want to get rid of some of the graveyard stuff against maybe the likes of Is It Phoenix is for sure, and then Rakdos as well. Just get rid of the graveyards. Make sure the graveyards aren't something you have to worry about. A lot of players won't want to see this in those types of decks, so it's a good inclusion as well. We got Thalia, Heretic Cathar. It's a 3 mana 3/2 with First Strike. So one of the things to remember here is this is 3 mana, and 3 mana you should be using sparingly in your deck. You want to have a really good card here in the 3-drop slot, but this is really good in terms of getting your anything that cares about having lots of non-basic lands. They're entering tapped, really useful. It really slows them down, and also the creatures enter tapped as well. So this also shuts down things like Is It Phoenix as well, because obviously the Phoenix will come in tapped and they won't be able to attack you. We've got Wedding Announcement here as well. I'm running 3 copies of these in the sideboard. This is really useful when you've got the opponent is removing a lot of your things. You're able to keep that pressure up by adding to the board. Your opponent's running board wipes, really useful, and it can help you with some card draw as well. And then once it transforms, creatures you control get +1/+1, which is really helpful in terms of just adding that a little bit extra to the board. But it will either give you some human tokens, or it will give you some card draw, and can be useful in some of those grindier games. That's the main deck and the sideboard done. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that I'm changing in the deck as well. So I mentioned that I might take out a plains. I think this deck could possibly run on 21 lands instead of 22. I'm going to try that out and see how it goes. When I've done some play testing of that, that seemed to be okay. When I've done it on Moxfield, just going through some of the turns that we take, it seems okay. On average, that would mean 2.45 lands on the first turn. So we can see at the moment, this is like an example of some of the hands that we draw. we tend to get enough. This is obviously a really good curve here. And we'll go back up here to the other creatures. So I was thinking I'm going to take out 1 plains and put in an Absent Falconer to the main board. So running 2 of them. And then I was going to replace the Soldier of the Pantheon with Recruitment Officer. So Recruitment Officer is a new card from Brothers War. And it's a 1-drop 2-1, so it has the same stats as the Savannah Lions. But I like this because you can pay 3 and a white and look at the top 4 cards of your library, reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them, and put it into your hand. Now, this is really useful in this deck because we're running 34, 35 creatures, and all of them are under 3. So the chances of you not hitting a creature with that are very, very small. And that can help you find your your Brutal Cathars, for example, that you might really need. Or it might help you find your piece like your Absent Falconer, which will help you win the game. But ultimately, some games you will flood. It happens to everybody, and that happened to me in one of my games. And this would have been a much better inclusion than the Soldier of the Pantheon. So I'm going to swap these out. So that's the deck. I'll leave the link to the Moxfield deck list in the description below. Thank you very much for staying with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Please check out some of our other videos. We're a relatively new channel. We're still looking to grow the channel, and we really appreciate your support. So hopefully I'll catch you soon at a Pioneer Night. Bye for now. Thanks for joining me for the deck list. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think, what you do differently, what decks you like to play in Pioneer. Just leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.